the former Vice President of the United States, Mike Pence. Mr. Vice President, good to have you.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks for having me on.
Let me ask you, sir, I know you were outraged by this. You said this is a criminalization of politics in this country, but it is, sir, a 34-count indictment. So do you think you might have spoken too soon? There might be some stuff in there of which you're not aware that could make those remarks look premature.
Well, no. Look, Neil, the unprecedented indictment of a former president of the United States on a campaign finance issue is outrageous. The details that will follow will not change that fact. And I think millions of Americans looking on see this for what it is. It's a political prosecution by a Manhattan DA who literally campaigned for office on a pledge to indict the former president. The Attorney General of New York campaigned for office on a pledge to go after that same American. And this is not an expression of equal treatment under the law that every American deserves. And I think that's why the American people aren't having any of it. Look, I know President Trump can take care of himself. I'm sure he'll prosecute this case in the courtroom, and as his lawyers will. But at the end of the day, this just is one more example of this two-tiered justice system that has so many Americans literally questioning the fundamental fairness of the administration of justice in our country, and I think it's deeply unfortunate.
If there are, reports that there were other women involved and that there were other paychecks involved and other payments involved, does it escalate for you and to you beyond what you're saying now, that if you had only known that, you wouldn't have told me what you just did?
Well, look, we're going off a lot of speculation here about what the accusations are, but I just think you ought to consider the source here, and that is that a liberal Democrat partisan prosecutor who had initially passed on bringing these charges, federal prosecutors who reviewed the same facts who did pass on bringing charges, and again, I just think this just smacks of the kind of criminalization of politics that the American people have had enough of. We sense in this country today, under the Biden administration and radical Democrats around the country, one set of standards for conservatives and Republicans, one set of standards for Democrats, and as I said, I think it all is setting into motion forces that are going to bring about tremendous change come 2024 all across this country, because the American people believe in fairness. They believe in equal treatment before the law, and I think they're going to be electing people from local prosecutors' offices to the highest office in the land that'll stand on that principle of the rule of law.
So I guess what confuses some people when you talk about fairness, Mr. Vice President, is this idea when many in your party, rightly so at the time, targeted Bill Clinton for an affair with a woman, that you're looking the other way when it involves something like that now.
Well, I think that's an interesting question. I haven't heard people, as I've been traveling around the country, talking about this issue on either side, whether it's past or present. I got to tell you, when I'm traveling around the country, people are talking about the fact that inflation's at a 40-year high, that gasoline prices are eating into their family's budget. They're worried about the crisis at our southern border. Not only the avalanche of illegal immigration, but the avalanche of fentanyl into every city, raging war in Europe after the Russian invasion, a menacing China. I just have to tell you that whatever happened in the 1990s with a sitting president of the United States, is a matter of history. But here, a former president of the United States, issues surrounding campaign finance. To me, it didn't even come close to rising to the level of the first indictment ever of a former president of the United States. And I do believe that the American people will see it no other way.
Well, many in your party do agree that, and in fact, they want to get to the bottom of, Albert Reagan, what he did here and whether he weaponized his office to do what he's done and to make this multi-count indictment. I'm just wondering, though, whether you think the House, which now wants to talk to him and get him to testify, is doing the same thing, weaponizing its powers to get revenge.
Well, I have to tell you, I'm somebody that believes in federalism, and as wrong as this DA is, I have a check in my spirit about the federal government becoming involved in even wrong-headed local law enforcement or prosecutions. And so I'd want our friends in the Congress to be judicious about that, careful about that. They can certainly ask questions, but at the end of the day, I think that this is a matter the American people see through. They see that politics is driving this decision.
But you would be against, sir, I'm sorry, just to be clear, you would be against what they're doing to try to bring him to the Hill to talk to him about this case. You don't think that's a good idea?
Well, look, I served on the Judiciary Committee in my years in the Congress of the United States. Congress has every right to ask whatever questions that they want to ask. But I think beginning with the premise that even bad decisions by state and local government are still an element of our federalism in the country. So I'd want them to temper their inquiries, to respect federalism. But at the end of the day, I think the American people do see through this. Neil, I was in Iowa just a couple days ago, and even with the specter of all these investigations and the prospect of this indictment happening, I did 3 different events. And this never came up once. I know it's present company accepted, but I know it's an obsession for many in the national media. But I got to tell you, where the American people are living today is under the failed policies of the Biden administration. They want to see leadership in this country that can turn America back around, get the economy growing again, get our border secure, defend our liberties, parents' rights. Right. Stand for life, and have America standing strong in the world again. And that's what people are talking about.
But this must be on their mind, right, Mr. Vice President? In fact, it's galvanized Donald Trump in the polls even before this formal indictment came down. I'm just wondering how it affects your own rumored presidential run. You mentioned Iowa. You've been there a few times. I think you've stopped in New Hampshire and South Carolina. Yet the president remains with a blowaway lead nationally. That could change. But this is actually built on that, at least in the Republican Party. Has this prompted you to maybe reconsider whether you run or not?
No, I mean, these developments and others like them would have no bearing on our decision whatsoever. My wife and I are giving prayerful consideration to entering the race for the Republican nomination for president. We're coming close to making a decision on that. But our focus is on the American people. It's not on the latest drama, the latest preoccupation of the national media, but it's on the challenges facing the people of this country. And I got to tell you, the American people are hurting, Neil. I mean, nobody knows the economy as well as you do. I ran into a woman at a gas station not long ago in Hobart, Indiana, who literally told me that even though she and her husband both work and have 2 young kids, that they have to go to the local food bank once a week just to keep groceries on the shelves. I mean, tens of millions of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck, and everything Joe Biden has done has only made things worse. And so our focus in this decision is on looking at our career in the Congress, looking at our career as governor, and of course, 4 years as Vice President of the United States, where we left America stronger and more prosperous before that pandemic struck, and saying whether we ought to try and offer our vision and our services to the American people. But I promise to keep you posted.
Please do. I appreciate that, sir. Let me ask you, you talk about trying not to get into this drama and all, but there are a lot of dramas concurrently going on concerning investigations of the former president, and one that you were just sort of dragged into when a judge asked to force you to testify in this grand jury investigation into the January 6th attack. First of all, are you going to follow through on that?
Well, obviously, I can't talk about it to any great extent because it's a matter involving the grand jury, Neil. But I can tell you,
sure,
that I am very pleased that the court recognized for the first time in history that the Constitution's speech and debate protections extended to my role as Vice President serving as President of the Senate. I truly believe that the initial subpoena was unconstitutional, and the court recognized for the first time ever that those constitutional protections did extend to me as Vice President in that role. And I met today with my attorneys. We're going to be continuing to sort out the best way forward. But I'm at least grateful that the court recognized that what some people were quick to dismiss was in fact the right position. I stood for the Constitution, doing my duty on January the 6th. And in this instance, I wanted to make sure that we were upholding that separation of powers provision in the Constitution of the United States as well.
Well, you stuck to that, and it alienated you with Donald Trump ever since. But that whole grand jury investigation, as you know far better than I, sir, is about whether the former president tried to overturn the 2020 election. Do you think he did?
Well, look, I know I did my duty that day. You know, under our system of government, states certify elections. And the only role of the Congress of the United States, over which I was presiding as President of the Senate, is to open and count electoral votes of the states. There's a process where members of Congress can offer objections. In the last 3 elections where Republicans prevailed, Democrats actually also brought objections. It's ordinary, it's under the law, but clearly the president had legal advisors in his ear that convinced him that I had authority to overturn the election. But as I've said before plainly, President Trump was wrong. I had no right to overturn the election that day, and I'll always believe, by God's grace, we did our duty under the Constitution of the United States.
But you have since said, sir, that history will hold Donald Trump accountable over the Capitol attack. Do you still believe that?
I do believe it, and not just President Trump for his actions that day, but also all of those that were responsible for what took place, the people that advised him at the White House, and obviously anyone that engaged in violence against law enforcement officers or vandalism at the Capitol will be held to account. And I truly believe that's the case. What we have to do is ensure the American people have all the facts of what happened that day, that they understand what each of us did in accordance to our duty under the Constitution of the United States, and then commit ourselves as a nation to ensure that it never happens again.
Well, I only say it, and not to belabor the point, sir, and you've been patient with it, but the former president has actually blamed you for the January 6th event. Quoting here, had he sent the votes back to the legislatures, they wouldn't have had a problem with January 6th. So in many ways, you can blame him, referring to you, for January 6th. What did you think of that?
Well, it's the argument one of his lawyers made on the very day of January the 6th, and there's simply no basis in it. I had no right to reject votes, and I had no right to return votes to the state. No vice president in American history had ever asserted either right. I knew what my duty was that day. We did that duty, but I must tell you, while the president and I found a way to finish our work by January 20th and parted amicably, when he returned to precisely that kind of rhetoric, we've just gone our separate way, Neil, and I haven't spoken to the president.
When's the last time you guys talked or communicated?
Yeah. Well, I haven't spoken to the president since we moved home to Indiana about 2 years ago, and my focus has been on my family, 3 new granddaughters that came along, on our kids, 2 of whose families serve in the armed forces of the United States, and working hard to help elect Republicans in those midterm elections and travel around the country supporting the conservative cause, and that's where we'll remain focused.
But it's been more than 2 years since you chatted with him. At a minute.
That's exactly. We haven't spoken since Karen and I moved back to that 5 acres in a pond in the state of Indiana, and I'm focused forward, though. I must tell you, Neil, this country's in a lot of trouble. President Biden has failed America at home and abroad. The American people are paying the price. The world grows more dangerous, as you recount on this broadcast regularly every day, now more than ever, I think every one of us that understands how to make America strong and prosperous and secure our liberties and our values needs to step forward and do our part. And I intend to do just that.
If I can finally, sir, just to tie together, and you mentioned the case of this Albert Bragg and his 34-count indictment, whatever becomes of these multiple counts and details, what they are, who they involve. There are, as I said, all these other investigations going on concurrently. You mentioned the January 6th one. We also get into the Georgia criminal inquiry, whether he was trying to upend that and influence a recount that was going on at the time. There's the classified government document issue here. There are, in other words, a number of potential indictments beyond these that could come his way. Then what? Is he, and do you think he would be damaged goods running for president?
Well, I think that would be up to the American people. And it's a long way between accusations, investigations, and even indictments to convictions. And so I wouldn't want to speculate on the impact of those things. I know the president well enough to know that Donald Trump can take care of himself. I'm sure he will defend his interests.
But if you were to run against him, Mr. Vice President, I'm sorry, sir, but if you were to run against him, you wouldn't mention these concurrent investigations, especially if they're going on. They are issues here.
Well, that's from my standpoint, if I were to enter the race, I think I'd be talking more about the need to strengthen our military, to stand tall in the world again, to meet America's obligations as leader of the free world. I'd be talking about how you pursue policies to get this economy growing again, and how we bring common sense and compassionate reforms to entitlements to avoid the national debt crisis that's facing future generations of Americans. I'd be championing the cause of life, defending American liberties. And on many of those issues, the president and I have differences of opinion, as I do with other people that may be running as well. If I get in the race, I'll be focusing on the choice the American people have, and not the latest drama coming out of Washington, D.C.
You have said, I believe, sir, that you plan to support whoever the ultimate Republican nominee is for president. Donald Trump has not indicated, but there are a couple of others who are also open on that subject. Do you still stand by that? And if you do, and assuming that Donald Trump could be your nominee, and you do support him, how do you feel about the possibility that he wouldn't return the favor? Let's say if it were you.
Well, Neil, I will tell you, my wife and I are sorting through our sense of calling about whether or not we'll enter the national race. And I'll express myself about other candidates in the future. But I got to tell you, when it comes down to my former running mate, I honestly believe that we'll have better choices by the fall of 2024. Look, I don't think anybody could have defeated Hillary Clinton in 2016 other than Donald Trump. But I think different times call for different leadership. As I travel around the country, I hear people telling me two things. Number one is we got to get back to the policies of the Trump-Pence administration that until that pandemic left America stronger, more prosperous than any time in my lifetime. But in the same breath, Neil, people tell me that they want to get back to a level of civility and respect in our public debate that used to be the norm just not too long ago. I mean, you look at the major challenges that we're facing after the failed policies of the Biden administration, the advances of the radical left. We got to find a way to talk to one another in politics the way the American people deal with each other every single day. And so from my standpoint, I think there's a desire for new leadership, a new direction, and that also means a new tone in politics. And if we can contribute to that, I promise you, as I said, I'll keep you posted.
I just want to be clear, sir. Are you saying it would be a mistake if Republicans ended up nominating Donald Trump again?
Neil, what I would tell you is I think we're going to have better choices. I honestly think Republican primary voters are going to look carefully at all the men and women that step forward in the field, and they're going to give us a standard bearer who will meet this moment in the life of our nation and really restore American strength at home and abroad and deal with the long-term intractable issues that are facing our country, whether it's the crisis at our border, whether it's a debt crisis that threatens the vitality of our country for future generations. Yeah. And I'm confident that voters will choose wisely.
I'd like to conclude, if you don't mind, sir, with a personal question here. You were very loyal to Donald Trump throughout his presidency, a tumultuous presidency at that, with a great deal of many policy successes, to your point. And then you stuck to your constitutional guns, which accurately you should have, and did what you did on January 6th to certify the electors and the election of Joe Biden as President of the United States. And that forever earned you the president's wrath and a lot of his supporters who, to this day, hate you for that decision. And I'm just wondering now, as you go back and look back at that and the 4 years you devoted to the president of the country, and hearing what he has said of you since and what his supporters have said of you since, how do you feel about that?
Well, thanks for pointing out. I was always loyal to President Donald Trump. He was not just my president, he was my friend. And we worked very closely together to, pass the largest investment in our national defense since the days of Ronald Reagan. We cut taxes, rolled back regulation, became energy independent for the first time in 75 years. We reduced illegal immigration by 90%. We appointed 3 of the justices to the Supreme Court who ultimately sent Roe versus Wade to the ash heap of history and gave us a new beginning for life. I'm proud of that record. And but I must tell you that going forward, as I've traveled around the country the last 2 years, I've been deeply moved at how many Americans have made a point to come up to me and express appreciation for the record, but also appreciation for the tough stands that we've taken. And so I will tell you that we put our faith in God and our family, but I also have great faith in the American people. And should we step forward and offer ourselves as a candidate for the Republican nomination for president, I'm confident the American people will look at the totality of our record, look at our convictions, and choose accordingly the best person to help lead our party and lead our nation back.
Mr. Vice President, thank you very much.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.